Hello and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.Om is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.Om, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. I'm really excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And today's episode of the podcast is going to be the final episode of 2021. So this is a tradition that I've had going for the last couple of years, where we spend the last episode of the year before we head into holiday time reviewing the year, talking about how the year went, what happened in the last year. And it's become one of my favorite traditions with my podcast. So I'm really excited for this final episode of 2021 to review what 2021 has been all about, things that went well, things that were challenging, and everything in between. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to give a little shout out to today's sponsor for the podcast, OfferingTree. OfferingTree is your one-stop shop for all things yoga business. This includes your website, your email list, your payment plans, scheduling classes, courses, memberships, video on demand, and even more. And I am so grateful to OfferingTree, who has sponsored the show for this entire year. We really couldn't have done it without them. So make sure you go and give them some love, offeringtree.com/MBOM. You also get a special discount with that link. And I'll be telling you a bit more about OfferingTree a little bit later on in the show. So stay tuned for that. Now let's kick this episode off by talking a little bit about the numbers. So in 2021, I put out 51 episodes of M.B.Om, including this one. So pretty much one episode per year. I think, obviously there were a couple bonus episodes along the way, and we took a little bit of a break around Christmas and New Year's last year. And of course, we're doing the same thing this year. I also put out 20 episodes of Matcha Mornings, which is one of my other podcasts on yoga, holistic health and wellness, and hormones, and 27 episodes of The World Wanders, which is my travel podcast that I co-host with my husband, Ryan, where we're talking about travel as a lifestyle, and all that good stuff. If you are interested in listening to some of the other podcasts I do, you can find them anywhere where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find all the shows at wanderbarn.com. But I think just looking at these numbers, it's pretty amazing to think about putting out pretty close to 100 episodes of podcasts in total, talking about all different types of topics with all different guests and all of that type of stuff. And we really had a variety of conversations on the podcast in 2021. We talked a lot about pivoting. There was a lot of pivoting happening with people's businesses, things from yoga studios to independent yoga teachers to teachers moving online. We did a lot of different conversations on how to shift your office yoga business, how to shift your conferences, and all of that type of thing. We also did a lot of different episodes on inclusivity, how to make social impact through yoga, how to make sure that the LGBTQIA plus community is feeling included in yoga, as well as Indigenous communities. So lots of different conversations around making a social impact. We also had a variety of episodes where we learned about different people's niches. And this is something that I really love on the podcast, is hearing from somebody who teaches something very, very specific. And one of the examples of that is the episode I did on hormone yoga therapy with Corinne McNally. And I actually ended up using and practicing hormone yoga therapy, and it's been a really big game changer in my life. We talked about technology. We talked about branding. We talked about yoga therapy, diversifying income streams, and so much more, and really dove into all different elements of yoga business, from things like Pinterest to workshops to money mindset, insurance, and all of that good stuff. So there was a lot of variety throughout this year, and I hope that you really enjoyed how much variety we brought to the podcast throughout the year. We had guests from all over the world, from, of course, the United States and Canada, but also people from, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, South America. There was a huge variety of guests, which is really cool. And one of the things that I truly love about running this podcast is being able to connect with yoga teachers all over the planet. I think it's one of the beautiful gifts of being able to run a podcast and to run an online business, is to be able to connect with people who are joining me from all over the world. And I've also been able to run the podcast from different corners of the world as well. So for me, I started 2021 in Campeche, Mexico. If you're not sure where that is, it's located right off the Yucatan Peninsula. It's just kind of south of Mérida, or maybe you might know better, Cancun. It would be a number of hours from Cancun, but just kind of on the southern part of the peninsula. That's where my husband and I kicked off the new year. And we spent most of the year this past year in Mexico. We lived in Mérida in the Yucatan for a couple of months. We spent about a month in the US celebrating a friend's wedding. We got our Mexican residency while we were there, so became residents of this beautiful country I get to call home. We lived in Puerto Vallarta on the West Coast in Jalisco for probably 5 months of the last year. So we spent quite a bit of time there. And we also spent a bit of time in Mexico City, as well as a bit of time in Querétaro, which is where I'm now tuning in from and where I'm now living. We also took a couple of months to go back to Canada and see our friends and family. So we were in Canada for about 2 months over the summer, and then made our way back to Mexico. And something that you guys may not know from this show is that we actually drove our car back down to Mexico. So we have our Canadian car here with us in Mexico, which is pretty exciting. And if you're curious what that journey was all about, it was pretty awesome. It was pretty fun and pretty adventurous, just like it sounds. And there is an episode on the World Wonders podcast all about that. So if you are interested, you can listen to that there. And I'll be finishing out this year here in Querétaro, Mexico. Querétaro is located about 2.5 hours north of Mexico City. We're going to be living here for the foreseeable future, and we're really excited about that. And if you've been following along on social media, then you know the reason for us settling down a little bit more. And one of the reasons for bringing our car down to Mexico with us is that this year brought about me getting pregnant. So I got pregnant in May, and we'll be welcoming a little baby girl into our family in early February, which we're really excited about. And a big portion of this year for me was about my pregnancy. I've spent most of 2021 at this point being pregnant, and it's been so interesting to navigate running a business while pregnant, and then also planning a maternity leave while pregnant and as a solopreneur and that type of thing. So that's been one of the biggest things I think that has shifted for me and changed for me in this last year. And going into 2021, we knew we wanted to tried to get pregnant. We weren't sure when the right time would be. And we were moving around a lot in the beginning of 2021 between living in Mérida, like I said, heading to the US for a wedding to see some friends, doing some pretty intensive travels. We were popping between, the East Coast and the West Coast. And we finally got settled in the early spring in Puerto Vallarta, and decided that that was a good time to begin our family. And I feel really blessed to be pregnant and to be carrying this little baby inside of my belly. But it's been such a whirlwind, because the first few months I was quite sick. I spent most of my days very tired and very nauseous and not really being able to eat. And that also meant that it impacted my work. And I felt so good in the second trimester, but we spent a good chunk of that in Canada visiting friends and family and telling them that we were pregnant. And I didn't dedicate a lot of extra time to my business or growing my business or anything like that, because I was just really savoring in the time that I had with family. And then we got back to Mexico at the beginning of October, and I hit my third trimester pretty quick after getting back to Mexico, which means that my energy dropped and, I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable, pretty tired these days. And most of my time since we got back to Mexico has been focused on what is next, planning for maternity leave, all of that type of stuff. And I think one of the things that's been really, really interesting for me has just been navigating how much something like a pregnancy can occupy in your life, how much, time and mental space and emotional energy it can really take up. And of course, physical energy as well, which completely makes sense since my body is growing a human. And so that's been probably the biggest change for me in my life and in my business. And obviously it's going to bring about a lot more changes as, baby girl enters the world. And I'm really excited to navigate that. And I'll talk a little bit later on when it comes to what to expect for 2022 so that you have an idea of what I'm planning for with maternity leave and what it's going to look like for the business and the podcast and all of that type of stuff. But before we get there, we're going to talk about a couple of other things, and I want to take a quick break to talk about OfferingTree.
Hey, yoga teachers, we're just taking a quick little break from the podcast to talk about OfferingTree. It's the holiday season, and you might be buying lots of gifts at all sorts of different stores. Are you offering the same opportunity to your audience? One of the reasons I love recommending OfferingTree is because you can create your own online store to sell products like videos or PDFs, or even courses in the same place that you build your website, schedule your classes, and run your membership. If you've been hesitating to sell videos because you don't want to learn yet another tech system, then OfferingTree could be the solution you've been waiting for. You don't have to upload your videos to YouTube or Vimeo. OfferingTree hosts them for you. OfferingTree also integrates with Stripe, so it's easy to accept payments for buying or renting store items. And if you already have a website that you love, you can easily embed OfferingTree's courses and membership platforms into your site. But here's why I really love working with OfferingTree. They are a small business just like you and I, and they really listen to their yoga teachers and their wellness entrepreneurs. So if you reach out and you say, hey, I need something on the platform, they're truly going to listen to you. And one of the reasons that the platform is so awesome is because yoga teachers have been helping OfferingTree make it better and better over the years. And of course, it is gifting season, so I have a gift for you too. All listeners of M.B.Om get a special discount on OfferingTree, up to $88 off an annual plan. Head on over to offeringtree.com/M.B.Om to get your discount. Once again, that's offeringtree.com/M.B.Om. Happy holidays, and back to the show.
All right, we're back, and I want to dive into a couple things that went well for myself and my business this year. And one of the things that I feel like went really well with the podcast and the business this year was just continuing to have great guests on the show. I really feel like there's no shortage of amazing guests to bring on to M.B.Om. I'm consistently just amazed by the quality of yoga teachers and business experts that are approaching me via social media or via email and pitching to come on my show, or that I'm finding through other podcast friends or, through other yoga teacher friends that are like, you have to interview this person. And I just feel like one thing that's continued to go well has just been the quality of people on the show. And over the years, I've done less and less solo episodes. If you remember the beginning, early days of M.B.Om, we did quite a few solo episodes. I tried to make sure once a month I was doing a solo episode that was just, me and you just hanging out, talking about yoga business. And I've just found that it's so hard to do that because there's so many amazing guests out there, and there's just such a plethora of people to have on the show. Similarly to that, I've worked with some really amazing yoga teachers over this last year in terms of one-on-one coaching. Yoga teachers have been through a lot in the last 2 years with the pandemic, and it's always really inspiring for me when I hop on a one-on-one session with somebody who is creating a new program or creating a new aspect of their business or building out a course or a podcast or something like that, and they want support with that. And they're just not allowing the current global situation to get them down. I think that that's really amazing, and it always really inspires me and empowers me. So to everyone that I worked with in 2021, thank you so much. I'm so excited to see who will cross my path in 2022 once I get back from my maternity leave. Similarly, you guys know I work with yoga studios. I work with 2 yoga studios, primarily one in Canada, one in the US. And I'm very happy to report that both of them are still alive and well. And I've done a lot of work over this last year to help them keep afloat and to help them really shift from surviving to thriving. And both these studios I've worked with for a while, and they were both thriving prior to the pandemic. They were obviously hit quite hard with having to pivot, having to take their businesses online. We were able to adapt with that, and they've continued to adapt to local regulations and, what the students need. And I would be lying if I didn't say that this was one of the more challenging aspects of the work that I do and with the clients that I support, but it's also very rewarding. It's very challenging to try to navigate a struggling business in a weird global time. But it also feels really good when you kind of feel like you've made it to the other side and you've come out successfully and you've, supported a business and helped them be able to continue supporting their students. So I'm really grateful for that work. And while this is some work that I'll be putting on pause for a good portion of 2022, I'm excited to get back into it in the future. I've also been teaching in a teacher training program called Vancouver School of Healing Arts. If you are interested in a 200-hour or 300-hour program or in yoga therapy, I definitely recommend checking them out. You can learn more at vsoha.com. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to teach so many teachers the business of yoga and really to introduce them to the business of yoga. And especially so early on in their yoga teacher career, I think that this was one of the things that I did not get taught in my first 200-hour yoga teacher training program. And I feel so grateful to be able to be introducing yoga teachers to the business of yoga and introducing them to the concepts that we talk about so often on the podcast. So that's another thing that's been really awesome for me over this last year. And then the final thing that I want to mention is that I've been in a year-long Ayurveda course through a program called Shakti School. I'll be finishing up this program in the next couple of weeks in the early start of 2022. And it's been such a beautiful journey to learn about something that's a bit more holistic and, doesn't really have anything to do with the work that I do. And hopefully I'll be creating some offerings with Ayurveda and maybe some of my yoga in the future, after I come back from maternity leave and all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. But I really have felt like doing a training program that was really just for me to learn, for me to grow, has been really, really beneficial over this last year. And I'm so grateful that I decided to sign up for this program. It was something that at the end of 2020, I wasn't really sure if I should do because it was a big financial undertaking and obviously a time commitment. And it's so easy for us, I think, as humans, to just convince ourselves that if it doesn't have to do with our businesses or it's not advancing what we're currently doing forward, then we shouldn't do it. And that was certainly my mindset. And I had some really amazing people in my life say, if you're inspired to do this, why don't you go for it? And I did. And I'm so glad that I did do that. So on the other side of things, I want to share a little bit about what was challenging over this last year. For me, I didn't see as much podcast growth or as much business growth as I maybe would have liked to in 2021. When I look back on the goals that I set for myself for 2021, a lot of them I didn't hit. And most of these goals were around, podcast download numbers and financial goals and that type of thing. And I didn't come far off from these goals. So I do feel really happy with the year overall. But I'd set some pretty lofty goals for myself for this year, and I didn't hit them this year, which is okay, but also, a little disappointing to look back on and see. I also had a pretty big goal of getting my courses revamped and out there, and just with all the craziness of being pregnant, that hasn't happened. It's still on my list of goals to hopefully do before I'm fully offline with baby, but we shall see what happens in the next couple of months and if that's something that I'm actually able to do and have capacity for. So stay tuned for that. If you are a part of the podcast or if you're on my mailing list, then you will obviously be the first to know once those go live. But know that I am working hard on getting those revamped. There's just been, so many other things that have come to the front of the burner, I guess you could say, and the courses continue to get pushed back to the back of the burner. And I would have really liked to have them out, prior to the end of the year, but c'est la vie. Sometimes these things happen in our business. And then I think one final challenge I'll mention has just been continuing to navigate the pandemic and all the different regulations and changes and things that are going on globally. I've found to be continuously challenging, as I'm sure that most of you listening have also, felt that in your businesses. And it makes it hard to plan out content. It makes it hard to plan out trips. It makes it hard to do a lot of different things. And it's been a real lesson in just going with the flow and learning to be flexible and adaptable, which I think we all need to do in our businesses. So that's one lesson that I'm really taking with me from 2021 and into 2022. So as we head into 2022, what can you expect, especially with me going through a pretty big transition of stepping into motherhood and welcoming a little babe into the world? Well, we're going to be taking a couple weeks off the podcast. So like I mentioned, this will be the last episode of 2021, and our first episode of 2022 will be on January 10th. So we'll be back in just a couple of weeks after a little break for Christmas and the new year. And I've been working hard behind the scenes to get everything ready for the first quarter of 2022 so that you have lots of awesome podcast episodes to listen to while I am busy taking care of baby. So we shouldn't be missing a beat in early 2022. That's the plan. And hopefully everything goes to plan with that. With regards to everything else that we're doing here at M.B.Om, most things will be taking a pause. So I'm not going to be taking on any coaching clients for the first half of 2022 as I navigate motherhood and navigate maternity leave and spending time with my little one. But if you are interested in working together, you can send an email and we'll get you on a list for once I am back taking coaching clients on again. Like I mentioned before, I'll also be taking a pause with the yoga studio work that I'm doing. So basically, it's just going to be the podcast continuing to go out each week. And then, of course, we've got social media and the private Facebook community. Those are all being managed by my amazing team. So you can still join that. You can still get great business recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. It might just not be coming from me for at least the first few months of 2022. And my plan is to be mostly offline with baby for the first half of 2022. And then we'll see how things are going and what capacity I have for taking other things on. I know that the podcast is going to continue, or at least that's the plan as of right now. But in terms of everything else, we're just going to wait and see how everything goes. We're entering a very uncertain time in life, my husband and I, and we just want to embrace what that's going to be like and meet our little girl and see what she's like, and we'll navigate the waters of business from there. And I'm really excited because I've had the chance to do 2 few kind of planning for maternity leave podcast episodes with fellow yoga teachers and entrepreneurs who have navigated this before me. Those will be out in February, and I'm really excited to share those. So if you're somebody who is also expecting, one, congratulations, and two, we've got some content coming out for you in terms of, how to actually plan for all of this, because it's a lot when you're, a solo entrepreneur, when you're trying to navigate how to pay yourself, how much time to take off, all of that type of stuff. And of course, we've got lots of other great episodes on a variety of other topics that'll be coming to you in the new year. And I'm really excited about all of them. So stay tuned for all of that. So I think that comes to the end of this episode. This year has been really crazy, I think, globally for a lot of us. There's been a lot of things going on in the world that have had a lot of emotional and spiritual weightedness to them. And if you're somebody who has successfully navigated this year, kept your business going, continued to make revenue in your business, I just want to congratulate you, because we're at a really challenging point in history, I think. And for a lot of us, it can be emotionally draining to just try to navigate this all. And so we should feel proud with everything that we've done. I know that I feel really proud with all the content I put out there, with all of the people I've been able to impact this past year. I am so excited for my journey into motherhood in 2022. I will definitely be keeping you guys posted on all of that. And I'm just really thankful that you've continued to listen to the podcast. So thank you for being a part of my 2021. I look forward to seeing you in 2022, and I'm wishing you a wonderful holiday season. All right, we'll see you next year. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to M.B.Om.yoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.